love you. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We've gotten the vacations out of our system. Dave has shaved his face. Dr. Dave, our theologian, is in the building. There he is, right there. Good to have you back.
Good to be here. Hello, everybody.
And you're still healthy.
I've had a very healthy COVID-19 break.
Have you been tested?
No, haven't had a reason to get tested. I think you have to have a doctor's prescription, and I show no signs of anything.
Good.
Barely life.
Good.
So I can't even get a test.
Do you wear masks when you go in shopping?
50% of the time. 30% of the time.
For the, like mine would have been 100% except yesterday. I put it on because I had to go into the grocery store, and I just didn't want to have a person say to me, "Where's your mask?" or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
There are days when you just don't want to answer anybody. So I put it on, got my water, and out I went. That's the first time I've ever worn a mask on any.
Well, I found it unsafe for me. Yesterday I had to go to a car repair store to get some tires put on my car. I had one of the N95 masks that my sister gave me. And the way it fits up on the nose way up high like this, it kept my glasses from it kept them from sitting on my nose properly.
Oh.
And my glasses are bifocal transition lens. So they were out here like that, so everything was askewed and I couldn't walk. So it was dangerous for me to even wear the mask. So I took it off. I couldn't see.
This is an amazing, tomorrow, you'll see it at another time. We're doing a show on the possibility of a conspiracy.
You're doing it with who?
Ted Broer.
Oh, well, he would probably have some inside information.
If there's ever a guy on the planet that, and so hopefully I can tamp him down a little bit. You know, that'll be because I have. He's done shows with me for 25 years.
Well, see if you can push him back to the very start where the conspiracy began, back when the white people first landed on our land. When they first said, we're going to stay a while. That's when everything began to change.
So you're saying, I should say, what about the Indians?
Yeah, I would say there's not a Native American alive who has any problem with conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
We know they're out there. Yeah. We know people are nefarious,
and
manipulative, and secretive.
Promises made, promises broke, right?
That's right. So it's not a new thing to some people.
We are here for Bible study. Do you realize what an honor this is to be on national television studying the Word of God?
Honor and a privilege, and not necessarily a guaranteed one anymore. So we need to take advantage of it every time we have the chance.
And we don't have to redact anything.
No, not yet.
Not yet. But in Canada you would.
And some countries you can't do it at all. You can't even talk about Christ over the air. So.
And we're going to study?
We're going to talk about the Epistles of Peter, one of the most boisterous, roughshod, spontaneous of the apostles. You know, a coarse language fisherman who just jumped in with both feet. Oh, the Bible says he did. When he denounced Jesus at the fire, he said he did it while he was cussing.
That's right, that's true.
Yeah, so he was a rough guy.
Dave is sharp. I got to show you something. This happened probably, I don't know, 25 years ago maybe. But we're going to show you. There he is. That's Ravi Zacharias, Sharon and myself. And who's on the camera? Preston. Look how young he looks there. You can tell by his neck how young his neck is. Preston's back there laughing. But that's Ravi Zacharias. He passed a few days ago, about a week ago, right, Dave?
Yes.
At 74. I mean, one of the apologists known worldwide. Brilliant man. Even had his own office at Oxford. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but
yes.
I could see why. He was very gracious, wise.
Did you ever meet him?
No, never met him. No.
Absolutely the kind of personality you never forgot. Brilliant, but you didn't know it when he walked away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Even in his debates or presentations in secular environments, He never comes across as a know-it-all. He never came across as somebody who was condescending to people, but it was always great wisdom, but without the spear tip. It was just laid out in front of you like a meal. You can consume this if you want. I always found his presentations very edifying, very encouraging.
He spoke to kings, princes in other foreign countries, dignitaries, and then he would go into the slums of India. I mean, but for 74 years, God gave him. And I've often thought, it's like I'm 81, so there's about a 7 years difference between our age. Do you ever feel like when somebody passes, you go, that should have been me, and he could have had my life? Because they just count so much for the gospel, and I feel like that, and what they're doing is like that.
Yeah, one of my first experiences with unexpected death of a prominent Christian leader was when Keith Green died when I was in seminary. And he was my favorite musical Christian artist.
Yes.
And he wrote such pointed, convicting biblical songs in a style that was a little bit controversial, cutting edge at the time. But it was his words.
Yes.
It was the message. And then he died in a plane crash. And I remember being perplexed as a seminary student as, why would he leave at this point in time? He was just ascending to the most effective phase of his ministry.
But every time I think like that, I'm reminded God never makes a mistake.
No.
And when you put your head around that, you realize whatever takes place to your loved ones, or whatever decisions in your family, or who dies, or who lives, or the accidents or whatever, God never makes a mistake.
No, it doesn't get rid of the pain or the discomfort, but it helps moderate it some. It helps you deal with it more effectively and more Christ-like.
Why should we know about 1 Peter?
Well, because Peter was an amazing man, and he communicated the gospel the very first time, of course, at Pentecost, that spread the gospel, started the great firestorm of evangelism. But it's what he has to say in these two short epistles, 1 Peter and 2 Peter, that is so applicable to today. And we're in the middle of this COVID-19 shutdown that for many people has been very, very difficult.
And you had your first service at Faith Baptist?
No, it's next Sunday.
Okay.
They've lost their income. Some of them haven't been able to pay their rent. They haven't had groceries. Some people have truly suffered. Most of us in America have not. But many Christians still complain about what has happened to us, even not going to church for 13 weeks. The great trauma that is. Well, we're going to see in 1 and 2 Peter, it is nothing compared to what the early church went through. And they went through with great courage and optimism and hope. And it's because of the things that we find in these two epistles.
And that is a great example, that compared to what we read in the Word of God, that they went through.
Right, and you can use one word. Most people know history would know. The word is Nero. Nero tells you what these people were about to go through that was already building when Peter wrote this epistle. Peter wrote it in 64 AD, just before Nero's persecution of believers began, which began right after a huge section of Rome burned down, and Nero blamed it on the Christians so he could confiscate land to build what he wanted to build, his own palace. But then he began to persecute believers, and in the next 3 years, he executed both Peter and Paul. Peter was crucified upside down, tradition tells us, and Paul was beheaded because he was a Roman citizen and couldn't be crucified. But that all happens from the time Peter writes 1 Peter, persecution begins, he is soon arrested, and 2 Peter is written soon after his arrest.
They knew this was coming, didn't they?
Yes, they knew. Yeah, they had known it for a while because they could see it. It was already coming from the Jewish empire. Judaism was already persecuting believers. But when Rome picked up that mantle, it became ruthless, and there was just no hope of escape. So 1 Peter, which is interesting, shares about 100 parallels, both in word, both in word and in...
You got vodka right there.
I don't know if it's going to help or not.
Yeah.
Vodka? I know it won't help.
That's the color of vodka, in case you wonder. It's just kidding.
Well, now I can barely even think now. So 1 Peter shares about 100 parallels with Ephesians, and it's because Paul and Peter were contemporaries and they knew each other. Paul had one time confronted Peter about Peter's lollygagging with Judaizers, and then Peter and Paul had conferred about.
Now, what do you mean by that? Because there is you have a reason for saying that.
Yeah, because Peter was observing Jewish law when Jews were around, and then he was throwing it to the side and hanging out with Gentiles when they were
not
around.
unlike us.
Yeah,
yeah.
And so, Peter, Paul was concerned about the theological implications. Peter just wanted, evidently, to be liked and accepted by these guys.
Yes.
But Paul was thinking, you're setting a bad example for the understanding of what real, true spiritual freedom is. So they knew each other, and all of Paul's letters were written, except for the ones to Timothy, by the time Peter wrote this epistle. So they were circulating. So Peter had read probably all of Paul's epistles.
Now help me out here, because you're so smart. Peter, a fisherman, he couldn't be smart. I mean, you don't think of a fisherman putting nets in the water to make a living, on a boat every day, and you can imagine how their hands smell and everything smells. You don't think of that as anybody with intellect, but yet, I mean, look at what he wrote.
Oh, I think Peter had a great intellect. He just wasn't educated. And there's a vast difference between intelligence and education. As a matter of fact, take somebody who has a master's degree or doctorate degree who's never fished in their life and put them with a trained fisherman who's never barely got out of high school, put them on a boat in the water. Who's going to look stupid and who's going to look smart?
Good example.
It's the environment that you're in.
Good
So
example.
Peter had a brilliance and an intelligence, but it wasn't educated. But when God awakened him with the truth of the conversion, when he finally understood who Jesus was, that intellect was set on fire by an educated man. Paul then educated Peter with his epistles. So Peter.
You think Paul ever said, Peter, how did you spell that word?
Well, Peter, I don't know how gracious Paul was. Who knows if he joked around or made comments about it. But Paul could write in Hebrew. Peter probably spoke only Greek and maybe Aramaic. Probably didn't speak Hebrew. Most of the Jews didn't.
So they were opposites.
Yes. Well, not opposite in terms of their fire and their spirit and their belligerence and their courage, but opposite in their educational background and their upraising. Peter was a roughshod fisherman. Paul was an entitled Roman citizen who was taught under Gamaliel, who was the utmost Bible
Educated
teacher.
beyond.
Yes.
Yeah. He would be kind of like a Ravi Zacharias kind of mind.
Yeah, except with the evil bent, because he was rising up the ladder of Jewish influence and power, with the idea someday of being the high priest himself. Wow. So that's how he was intellectually educated.
So Paul would have been self-taught. Peter.
Peter.
Yes.
Would have been, well, not so much self-taught, but he didn't go to organized education. He probably got it by reading Paul's epistles, which all of them were written. Even by the time Peter died, Paul's letters to Timothy were then written, because Paul died before Peter. So Peter had the time to read all of those great epistles, and it comes out in his writings, which means he understood it. He absorbed it, and he applied it to his life, because it's all over the epistles of Peter, the writings of Paul. And so 1 Peter was probably written from Babylon, which is probably a cryptic reference to Rome. Paul says, I'm writing from Babylon, but historians say that's because he's really writing from Rome, and he didn't want to get the Roman believers there in trouble.
The Rome as we know today?
Yes, where Nero was. And so Peter knew this was brewing. Nero was developing an attitude towards believers, so he's writing this letter, and he says from Babylon, because that was a common cryptic reference to whatever government was oppressing the Jews at the time, and it was Rome, but he didn't want to say Rome. That's what most Bible scholars think. So he was either actually in Babylon or he was in Rome, one of the two.
If you're wondering, Dave is giving a overview, right?
Yes, we're going to do an overview to set the stage.
Lead into next week.
Next week we'll start the verse-by-verse study of the two epistles to Peter. But you need to know the background. You need to understand and why this letter is so important, because it is about a church or a region who is about to experience the worst persecution you can imagine, where they're just being taken out of their homes and dipped in tar and burned at the stake, fed to wild animals, cut in half, no regard for sanctity of life at all, unless they were Roman citizen, then they were beheaded. That was an act of kindness.
But using that context you just said, would they not say, God, where are you? I mean, we're here doing what you called us to do. We are fulfilling your plan for our life, and we're being tortured, persecuted, hated.
Yes, and that'd be the very human response. I think we all would react like that, at least probably initially. So that's why Peter writes these two epistles. And the theme of the epistles is hope. So when scholars talk about Peter and Paul and John, Peter's often called the apostle of hope, Paul is called the apostle of faith, and John is called the apostle of love. So Peter is writing to instill hope in these people because he knows what's coming. He knows it's going to come hard, it's going to come fast, and most of you are not going to escape this, but you've already escaped the judgment of disenfranchisement from God and punishment in hell. You've escaped that. And he's trying to give them hope. And he puts that hope in terms of one word, suffering. In these two little short books, he mentions suffering 16 times. 10 of those are the sufferings of Christ, 6 of them, and then 10 of them are the sufferings of believers. So he talks about suffering, and he mixes it with grace 8 times in this short little book. So it's suffering, grace, and hope are all intertwined. They don't cancel out each other. So for the believer, we have to understand that our hope and our peace and our joy is not tied to things going our way. It's not tied to a smooth road.
That takes some pretty heavy spiritual understanding, because the average person would not buy into that.
And you can buy into it and not know if you really believe it until it happens. The only way you really understand grace and peace in the midst of suffering is for the suffering to come. You can know it theoretically. You can say, this is the way I think, this is the way I feel, this is my creed, but you never really know till the shooting starts in war. How are you going to react? You don't know until the rubber hits the road how long that tire is going to last. That same thing is true of this idea of suffering, which was a guaranteed aspect of a believer's life in the early church. And Peter is telling them, here's your hope, and have hope. It's the grace of God in the midst of suffering.
Could this message be for today?
Oh, I'm sure it is.
I mean, are we facing, as close as he saw it, that kind of persecution?
Well, there are believers all over the world today in other countries who are facing exactly that. Some of them could lose their lives, could lose their careers, could lose their family for simply being believers. So it is literally
in pockets of the world.
Applicable in pockets of the world now, which means it's theoretically possible to happen to America. And we see how America is going. There's been this reprieve and this pushback the last 3 or 4 years, and we're praying that it goes on further, that God holds us back. But at some point in time, it's going to be released. And at some point in time, there's going to be people in the White House and in the Congress who truly have a one-world global perspective. They have the power to implement it, and one of the barriers will be this individualistic Christianity.
A demonic Democrat will be in office, but again, a president, even if it's a Democrat and is socialist and a whack job, God appoints them.
Yes, because God has a purpose. And there's many Republicans who are Republican in name only, who still have very socialistic, communistic, secularistic viewpoints. So it's not so much party.
They're protecting their territory.
The proportion is party, but most politicians are in it to protect the political machine. Whatever will protect that. And political machines stay in power by controlling the people. So most of the people who get involved in politics, if they don't get in there thinking that way, once they're there, they understand how the mechanism works, they become part of the machine that governs the people. So whatever keeps the people under control is a good thing in their mind. Now for the mindset of early America, which was complete individualism, and you don't tell me what to do, and the government is to be hands off and just you protect us, but you don't tell us what to do, that has disappeared.
Yeah.
It is now assumed that Americans, we comply with our government, and we do what's best for the community as a whole, even if that's a philosophical good. We have to abide by it.
Okay,
And we see it playing out in COVID-19.
We've got about 7 minutes.
Well, in the first epistle, Paul intertwines or weaves together 5 great themes: the sovereignty of God, the salvation of man, the sanctification of the believer, the suffering the believer is going to face, and the service that is still expected.
Wow.
So these 5 things, sovereignty, salvation, sanctification, suffering, and service, Peter has them running through the first epistle primarily.
Give us a quick definition of each of those. We know salvation, but sovereignty.
The sovereignty of God is his authority over all things. He can exercise it to whatever degree he wants. Some people think sovereignty means he has absolute, total control of every single atom and molecule. He certainly has the right to do that.
Yeah.
We don't know to what extent he exercises it, but God is sovereign, even over the prince of the power of the air. God's in control, and he has complete divine royal authority over what he has made. Salvation is our rescue from perishing. Sanctification is us being set apart as a separate people, separate from the world. And God is dealing with us differently than he's dealing with the world. Our suffering is what we are going through because of that separation.
But we haven't experienced that suffering.
Well, we is a relative term. There could be some people who are watching right now who have endured that suffering.
You mean because of their salvation?
Because of their salvation. There might be people who live in America who used to live someplace else.
I understand.
You know, many people are watching. So there are people today who do suffer for their faith, and some people could suffer, you know, slightly in relationships and mocking and ridicule, but
that's not
nothing.
suffering. Yeah.
And then service. That all of that suffering does not cancel out the obligation and opportunity to serve. We are to serve. And then Peter refers to Christ as a number of different terms: a spotless lamb, only he and John do that; the chief cornerstone, the precious stone, the stumbling stone, the bishop of our souls, and the chief shepherd. So he is setting the stage for what he's going to say to them about who they are by first pointing out who Jesus is, that Jesus is this most prominent, preeminent individual in your life as a believer, as he's writing, because he is the spotless, perfect lamb. He is the chief cornerstone upon which every single thing is built, valuable beyond any other stone in this building, precious, and that he's also a stumbling stone to those who don't believe. They stumble over the fact that they must trust in him, and he's our complete bishop and chief shepherd. So that is where we get our identity from. You and I are Americans. We identify as American citizens, and we identify with the greatness of America, the virtue of America, the philosophy of America. It tells us who we are. Knowing who Jesus is tells us who we are. Yeah. And that's what Peter wants them to know, because they need to be well grounded in their identity to get ready to go through what they're going to go through. Wow. Or else they'll change sides. Yeah. And that's the point. So he then refers to them with 14 different terms. I'm not sure we'll get through all of these, but that'll give you an idea. In this short book,
we have 5 minutes, so we got time.
In this short book, he calls Christians obedient children. And that's emphasizing our growth, our submission, our following our parental guide, which is their Heavenly Father. So we are to be obedient children who look like the Father.
Yes.
He also then calls us and tells us we are to be newborn babies. And a newborn baby, that would be dependency and hunger. Our dependency upon the mother for food, our constant craving for food, and as babies, that's the paramount thing on their mind. They will scream out when they want food, and the Bible tells us we're to hunger for God's word like that. Yeah. So we're obedient children, we're newborn babies. Peter also calls us in this book living stones. Christ being the chief cornerstone and a living stone and a precious stone and a chosen stone, he calls him. We are living stones, which means that there's a vibrancy to us. We're not just dead doctrinal belief holders. We are vibrantly alive, but we're connected as stones in a structure would be. And each one of us are to have our own strength, as a stone has a strength. He then calls the believers the holy priesthood, which indicates holy means sanctified. It means set apart. Yeah. where we are to have a sanctified service to God. We are to be doing things for God that is uniquely for Him, that only we can do, that the world cannot do. And then we are called a chosen generation. And that means we've been chosen, means selected, called out, appointed for a purpose, chosen for a purpose. So He wants these believers to know you didn't just decide to follow Jesus or believe in Jesus. You were a chosen generation. That means you were chosen for a purpose. Fulfill your purpose.
Amen.
And then He calls believers a royal priesthood, which more than the chosen part, it emphasizes dignity and authority, being part of the royal lineage of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And then He calls us the holy nation, which is emphasizing order and law, that we're not just a group of believers who can do anything that we want. There's a structure and there's a law. It is the law of love we are to follow, the law and the spirit of life in Christ Jesus, the law of grace. There are laws for us as believers that we are to follow. And then He calls us a special people, valued above others. Peter said that you are peculiar in the King James. And then he says strangers and pilgrims, which means that we're travelers. We have a citizenship someplace else. Peter wants the believers to know that you are a uniquely gifted, called, chosen, valued people, because your Savior is the valued person of all the universe. So once you know who He is, and you know who you are, and you identify who the world is and what its intent towards you is, you can prepare for the battle that is to come. In the United States, we've heard since the 70s when I became a believer, I've heard about all the rumors and the projections of America someday turning against Christ. And in my life, I haven't really seen it other than in subtle ways and inconvenient ways, but I know it's eventually coming. But we do know it's going to happen someday, and are you ready for it? You don't get ready for it by getting strong and getting angry and getting militant and becoming a protester. You get ready for it by focusing on who Jesus is, what He wants from you, and then who you are as a believer. Because as a believer, the world will hate you, the Bible says, and if it has the opportunity, it will kill you. So where do you anchor your faith? Not in survival, not in victory against the enemy, the physical enemy, but in being faithful to the chief cornerstone and being like Him, being a living, vibrant stone of faith yourself. So focus on the Lord, and you're called to be faithful to Him, and let's get ready for whatever the world may have prepared for us.
Wow. Isn't this great? Isn't this great? I mean, I am so hungry and excited about what is ahead. Watch next week. This was just a prelude. God bless. Bye-bye.